Hello there, and welcome back to my tutorials on spatial audio in VR. Today I'm going to talk a bit about actually finding the sound sources that you'll be using in your videos, because often you don't have a working ambisonic recorder on hand to do the recording for you. And even then, sometimes it's not the best way of getting a nice spatial mix. So, let's talk about where these sounds can be heard first. If you're looking for natural animal sounds such as birds or insects, some of my favorite collections are those created by the Audubon Society. They have recordings of nearly every bird in the North America, certainly the US. And today we can listen to, say, the winter wren, which I think is has a particularly beautiful song. So, we visit the page on the winter wren, and down here at the bottom right, after all the information, we have a selection of recordings. Let's take a listen. Now, you'll notice that this recording is very clean. It has almost no background noise, and the only sound that you can hear is that of the wren itself. There's very little reverb already present in the sound, which is perfect for what we're trying to do, which is apply reverb and distance to it. Let's listen to the next track. You notice that this one has more reverb already present in the track and a little bit of background noise. So it's not as ideal for our purposes. We probably won't use it. This next one is also fairly nice. Very direct sound, very little background noise. Notice how a crow came about in the background of this one. We could use the first half of it, but not the second, because it would be very difficult to take out the crow because its frequency spectrums are similar to that of the wren that we're listening to. Let's listen to number 3. Notice a good amount of background noise, something that might sound like cars in the distance. This might not actually be too difficult to use because the noise in the background sounds very different from that of the bird itself. So noise removal won't interfere too much with the sound of the bird. So we'll try using a couple of these. Before we do, I'm going to show you another favorite source of mine, which is the Vimeo user Miracle of Nature, a collection of people who make natural sounds, or who record natural sounds in the wild, and do so out of the goodness of their heart. And the sounds here are free to use, with permission, of course, but there's no royalty. And one of the more beautiful ones is that of the snowy tree cricket. Now, it's difficult to use this sound alone because it has a lot going on in the background. But the background itself is fairly nice. If we wait for a few seconds, or skip ahead, we have a period of silence in which you can only hear the background. This is something that I've used for several soundscapes. You can make a nice loop out of this, and it provides excellent ambience. Lovely recording quality. Now, once you have permission to use these sources, there remains the question of how to actually download them onto your computer. And I'm sure there are a host of ways to do so that require external software. It turns out that software like Reaper, or in today's case Audacity, is more than adequate to record anything that you can actually play on your computer. This is a very useful technique on all PCs, Macs aside. They don't have this particular feature because of their audio drivers and systems, But if you're using Windows, then when you open a program like Audacity, which is free to download and install, very simple, you can select Windows Wasapi as the driver that you're using for audio. And then if you select your speakers as your microphone, seems a little odd, but it works, then the program will record whatever it is that your speakers are playing. You'll make sure that you're set to stereo recording, because that's how your speakers will play by default. And then if you play back a sound, and you'll want to get permission from these individuals here, then when you're recording, the computer will pick up the sounds that are playing from your speakers before not using any microphone, just using the internal audio. So there's no loss, no interference, no compression, just as they would be played normally, which is very, very handy to have. If we were to continue recording, then we could have more sound. We won't use number 2, but we'll try 1 and 3. And finally, all right then. So now that we have those now in our project, let's talk a little bit about, let's just drag this back up. I suppose we can separate them for now, since we'll be doing some different operations on each. So let's talk a bit about prepping sounds that you want to use. I'm going to use the drag tool just to drag this back over. All I did earlier was I copied and pasted the selection that I highlighted. So now we have our 3 different recordings here. And this first one, I'm going to click solo, and it's going to play by itself. Is of high enough quality that I think we can simply use it as is. So we can take this and we can export it. Lies. There's one more thing we have to do. Before we export any of these, we're going to want to make sure that we make them into mono tracks. So if we click on this audio track bar here and select split stereo to mono, it will turn it from a stereo track to a mono track. And then we don't need the left side anymore. We can just use the right, or we could have used the left. It's really our choice, but I believe the two were identical. It just appeared as stereo because that was how we decided to record, or needed to record in this case. So now that we have it as audio, we can, as mono, we can export it, we'll say, to the desktop for now for convenience, and call it Winter Wren Call 1. So, with the audio exported, we actually don't need that track anymore. And now let's listen to the next one. So notice how there were a few places where we got sounds from other birds. First, we'll just split this to mono so it takes up less space. And I'll delete one of the sides, since they still appear to be identical. And now we'll zoom in and look again. So here, there was a sound that we didn't want. Here, and here, here, and here. So, of those, only one was happening simultaneously with ours. So, what we can do is we can amplify, or in this case, negatively amplify, the sound source that interfered with our call. So I'm going to zoom in a bit so we can see this. And let's apply that effect. Let's try again. And all of a sudden we can't hear it. Magical. Now we can do the same for this source here. And let's zoom in here so we can see a little bit more of what's going on. Alright, it looks like it starts here. Let's just select this and play to confirm. Yes, that sounds about right. It sounded like we cut off the second sound a little bit, so we'll extend that. And we will repeat that same amplification. Now let's play it through. We should only hear one call. That isn't the one we want. And there it was. Alright. There was actually one other that we didn't notice before. A little bit started right here. So, if we want, we can take this and repeat the amplification. Alright, and that should be good for this track. You can, I just heard another, and you can refine this as much as you like. For now, I'm going to call this good. And we will take this audio, we'll export it as a second call. Oh, chirps would probably be more accurate. And now, for this third one. Now this one's interesting because it has a lot of background noise, so I'll be able to show you the noise removal tool. And the quality of this recording isn't great, and I might not choose to use it, but for the sake of demonstration, it'd be very helpful to show you the noise removal tool in action. Before we do, notice at the end that it fades out. So they applied an effect there, and you can't unapply an effect. That is very difficult to do. So I'm just going to remove that last portion. And then we can start with noise removal. So, if we zoom in a bit, we can see that when the bird isn't chirping, that there's background noise. And if we want, I can press shift and then play, and it will just loop through it. You can hear there's a little bit of a bird call here as well. Shouldn't interfere too much with the noise removal, but what you want is to find a long period of sound that is as close to just the noise that you want to get rid of as possible. That has a little bit more bird sound in it, so I might not use that portion. That certainly has a lot of bird in it. This, I think, is the best so far. And it's only, a portion of a second, a little over half, but it should be long enough. So if we go to Effects and we go to Noise Reduction, you select first the option, Get Noise Profile, and that will use the area that you've just selected to figure out what it is that you want to remove. Then you select your entire track, and use Noise Reduction again. You don't want to use the repeat option here because you haven't actually done it yet. And then you'll have a few values here. You can leave these as is for the most part. Noise reduction is just how much you want to get rid of. The more you, the higher this value goes, the harsher the effect. You want it to be high enough that you don't hear the noise, but low enough that you don't hear any artifacts on the sound itself. To demonstrate, and you want to make sure reduce is the option that you choose. This will just leave the noise if you click residue. Here's the harshest setting. Let's listen. If you listen closely, you can see that there's some almost computerized artifacts on the sound of the bird. It's subtle, but it's there. However, the background noise from the cars or whatever it was, or the wind, it's all gone. So you can probably afford to use a slightly lower noise reduction. Let's say we start with something like 20. Alright, the noise is already completely gone. You could even go lower. Say 12, than where we were at the beginning. So, if we want to use this, we now no longer have the noise to deal with. For comparison, there it is with the noise, and here it is without. There are still some birds in the background, and we could, of course, mute those using the amplification, but you already know how to do that, so I won't bother teaching you again, and we will export this audio as Winter Wren Chirps 2. Alright, and you won't need to save your Audacity file once you have the audio exported. So now, if we open up Reaper, we'll open up the Spatial Workstation demo file. We will save this project as our lovely test file. And we'll start getting rid of tracks here. Alright. We have 3 different sound sources at the moment. So, we will only keep 3 of our spatial tracks. And we won't be using any headlocked, so we can get rid of these. I'll leave 1 just in case I change my mind. Now, all you have to do is insert a media file, find wherever you placed the recordings, and insert them on separate tracks. Now, in this case, it inserted them from the track I had selected, which was the Headlock Stereo 2, but I'll just drag them up to these over here. Looks like one exported strangely. Oh no, it was just quiet. That one's very quiet, so we won't use it for now. We can fix it later. But if you listen to the rest, we now have our audio files precisely where we want them. And we can load up a video that will match with this. I'm not going to be using the beach video this time. I am going to be using some recordings from Guile. Let's stop this while we're doing other things. And open that. Now let's say I want to sound as though I have 2 wrens chatting at once. Come on now. There we are. One very useful feature of Reaper is that when you click the border of an audio recording, you can automatically loop and repeat it. These files will already seem well looped because they have silence at either end. If it's a continuous thing, like the sound of wind or waves, it's a little more difficult to loop. I'll get into that later. So let's spread these out with a variety of durations, shall we? And it's good to have variety and staggering like this, because otherwise your track will sound very artificial. And that's 40 seconds worth of sound. That'll be more than enough for this. And now we'll start talking about the effects. So, notice that the input on track 2 is V format by default. We're mono, so we choose left, right, or mix down. It doesn't matter which. Let's just make sure the same is true here on track 3. All right, good. So if we play this, let's say we want one bird to come from over here, and if we open the other, let's say we want this bird to come from over here. Excellent. So now we have the matter of distance to worry about, and these sound far too close for the video itself, so let's send them out a bit. Alright, so we still got a couple things missing, as you'll know from watching the previous videos. We're going to need an EQ, and we'll need some reverb. So we'll add an impulse response. We'll make sure that the spatializer is the last track. I'm just going to loop this while I'm doing this work, so that I don't have to go back and start it over again. Alright. So the moment spat 3 is going to be the track that is on my right. That actually sounds pretty good right now. Just the default settings on the reverb. So, and with just that little low pass down there. So I'm going to leave that. And in fact, that worked well enough, I might just copy the values over to the other bird. See how it works. Make sure this is the last one. Alright. I'm just going to listen to the one on my left for now. The reverb is a little bit too severe there. Alright, that'll be close enough. Ignore that this is a time-lapse video. Pretend it's playing in real time. And it's almost plausible that these birds could be nearby. So yes, that's an introduction on how to work with natural animal sounds such as birds. And it's all really a matter of listening and iteration until it sounds good to you. But that's what makes it an art and not a science. Alright, in my next series of videos, I'll be talking a bit more about continuous sounds, such as wind and waves.